Hello, Facebook friends. Now, I have to tell you, this interview is a special treat for me. Many of you who watch the program every day know that I am leaving for the Congo on on May the 13th. This is my second trip to the Congo, and each time we make that trip, our entire purpose is to teach leadership in government for the purpose of building up democracy and its strength. And one of the biggest challenges against that is the overrun of communism, the overrun of corruption, the lack of leadership, the failed morality of many of government leaders. And it doesn't matter where you're at. That's a reality of government. The old phrase says, power corrupts and absolute power corrupts. Absolutely. Well, one of the experts in the industry of what Marxism looks like, what socialism looks like, what democracy is supposed to look like is Dr. Carol Swain. Now, I don't know all of your resume. Give us a little bit of a rundown on who you are and how you know so much.
Well, I'll do the best I can today, but I'm a professor of political science and of law at Vanderbilt University.
Wow.
So I'm a political science by training, and I was tenured at Princeton as a congressional scholar.
Wow.
And so I'm not an expert on Marxism. I only became interested in Marxism in the last 5 years or so when I watched the political correctness and a lot of the identity politics and how they were doing multiculturalism, what was taking place in America. And that's what got me studying some of the early Marxists and seeing the impact that they've had on the U.S. society, but also how devastating they've been in other countries.
Now, when we look at democracy, and I know that there are people who look at the United States and they go, well, you call it democracy, but it's really a Republican form of government, and that's not Republican as in the party, but in the form of government, a Republic representative form of government. Is that right?
It is, but the thing about America is that you can't separate our system of government from the fact that the nation has strong Judeo-Christian roots, that many of the people who came here to found the nation were people that were had strong Christian values and principles, or they were deists, they believed in a God. And so I think that that is important for understanding the system of government that was set up. We are a republic in the sense that we, the people, elect the politicians. They're supposed to enact the programs and policies on our behalf. And so we have a system of government that is supposed to have checks and balances, separation of powers, where you have the Congress, the executive branch, the judicial branch.
They're supposed to be watching each other.
They're supposed to be watching each other. And then states, federalism, where you have states that are supposed to have rights, as well as the federal government. The federal government, under the system set up by the framers of the Constitution, was not supposed to control everything the way it does today in America. And so in America, we have our own problems, and one of the things that's made America and Western civilization in many ways superior to many other civilizations, and I know it's politically incorrect to say that, is the fact that we've had the rule of law. Okay. We've had this belief that no one was above the law, and that to have a society that was civilized, you had to have predictable laws and outcomes for violating those laws.
So let me bring that down to being a grandpa. When I tell my grandson, don't climb on the motorcycle because it's hot, being hot is the reason that he can't climb on the motorcycle. Not because it's a motorcycle, but because it's hot.
Right.
And he can injure himself. So in the mornings when it's cold and it hasn't been cranked up and he wants to climb on it, that's okay. We seem to have people, though, that they forget that principle or that condition of when it's hot. And so
right.
It may be right to, for an example, offer a job to someone in your family, except when that nepotism threatens the integrity of the organization or threatens the integrity of the law. And so hiring that person then puts you in a place where it's not possible for you to make a right decision.
Well, you know, like when you talk with people in the Congo, unfortunately, the American system is not working the way it should work. And so we have our own forms of corruption. You know, it's not, maybe not as severe as you find in some countries.
Not as blatant,
but it's just through the lobbyists. You know, like we have a
right.
Congress that doesn't operate the way the Congress is supposed to be responsive to the people. And we also have the situation where we have laws on our books that
no
we
one's
don't
enforcing.
enforce. We turn a blind eye to our own laws.
Give me a couple of those as an example.
Well, we know about immigration.
Right.
And so one reason we have such a problem with illegal immigration is that for decades, you know, we've not enforced our laws, and we've pretty much invited people, and we've done a wink-wink. And we know with in the inner cities, Chicago, for example, you know, it's like the murder capital of the U.S. as far as so much violence. And in some parts of the U.S., the police have pulled back from policing, and you just have chaos. And this new thing that's happened on colleges and university campuses, it's the anarchists that are trying to shut down free speech. And we know that in America we have a constitution. First Amendment guarantees freedom of religion, freedom of speech, freedom of association.
But that's only if we agree, right?
Right. Well, I mean, the Marxism. Bring the Marxism in. I mean, the whole purpose.
So instantly, free speech is only free speech if I like what you have to say.
Yes.
You're only free to say it if I like it. Because if
right.
I'm offended by it, I need a safe space, and you should go say it over there or not say it at all.
But I mean, it's even more serious than that. And in my research, I went back to Herbert Marcuse. He was a Marxist theorist who taught at universities, particularly in the 1960s, maybe 1970s. I don't know when he stopped. But he was the mentor to Angela Davis. And she was one of the radicals of the 1960s that was involved in some, attempts to violently overthrow the
like
U.S.
The rules for radicals.
Well, I mean, that's a different part of it. But Herbert Marcuse.
So were these guys contemporaries?
Yeah, I think they did. Yeah.
Okay.
But Herbert Marcuse came up with. He's the father of political correctness. This idea of repressive tolerance. An essay that he authored in 1965.
Listen to that word for a minute. Repressive
tolerance.
That is a powerful phrase. Not only is it an oxymoron, but it's an extremely manipulated. What is that word? Polemics. It's a way of using politics and theology together as a crowbar to pry you into the box they want you to be in.
Let me explain it. Okay. 1965. Herbert Marcuse authored an essay of repressive tolerance. You can Google and download a copy. It's about 25 pages. So anyone, that's educated or semi-educated that loves to read can read this essay. But he argued that in America, free speech empowered the people that had power. And so they could afford to be tolerant because their power was not threatened. And so he came up with the idea of repressive tolerance. You would be intolerant towards anyone who was conservative or espoused Judeo-Christian values because they were the oppressors. So you needed to shut them down, and you needed to liberate tolerance of the ideas of people who had been marginalized, the gays, the blacks, women, whoever else you want to fit into that group, environmentalists. You would liberate their voices, but you would repress the voices of the people who held power. And so what you see happening on university campuses is the application of Herbert Marcuse's repressive tolerance. Shut down everyone else except your own voices. And he wrote his essay 1 year after the Berkeley free speech movement. And with the Berkeley free speech movement, the students were actually on to something that at Berkeley, they did not have the right to participate in politics the same as other citizens. And so that's all they wanted. And they won their battle. They won it in 1964. And so they got free speech. But the radicals in the free speech movement immediately started shutting down everyone else's speech. And then the year after that, Herbert Marcuse wrote his essay, Repressive Tolerance. And then you ask about Saul Alinsky. Saul Alinsky wrote Rules for Radicals. It was published in 1971. He watched the radicals at the Democratic Convention, and they were throwing things at police. They were using the F-bomb. They were dirty. They were shaggy-haired. And he saw that they were turning off the American people, and he knew that they would get nowhere doing that. In fact, just like the anarchists today, they were creating more conservatives. So they were pushing people into the other camp. Saul Alinsky said, you're doing it all wrong. what you need to do pretty much is cut your hair, take a bath, go into the system, keep your head down low. He advocated infiltration, deception, and manipulation. And so he urged people to go into the system, you know, and hire people like yourself until you get a critical mass, and then take over the institutions. And so you have...
Hang on for a second, because I see that same behavior now in the places where immigrants are coming in, and they're coming in with their worldviews and their ideologies, which are different than society. Belgium is a good example. I remember seeing the interviews on the streets with young Muslim men who were coming into countries,
Right.
and then they would say, well, so, you know, you're an immigrant into Germany, but, excuse me, it doesn't seem like you're really acclimating to German culture. He said, no, we don't need to. You have 2 children, we have 9 children. You have 1
right.
wife, we have 90 wives.
Wait, let me tell
Very
you this.
soon you'll be overpopulated.
Well, let me tell you this. The political left uses Islam, racial and ethnic minorities, women, anyone, to advance their agenda, because their agenda is to overthrow Western civilization, to destroy the Judeo-Christian way of life. And Herbert Marcuse also wrote a book in 1955, Eros and Civilization, in which he argued that the way to change the culture was to break down its sexual inhibitions. So he advocated liberating people sexually. So he pushed, that would be homosexuality, polygamy, adultery, to get away from the Judeo-Christian notion.
That would have been about the same time. What was the guy's name? Kinsey? Who did the study on sexuality and exposed the 2-month-old to sexual attraction to see, and all of that seemed to happen around the same time.
I mean, all of these people had an agenda. All of these people knew what they were doing.
Demonic.
But the thing about it is that a lot of us were not paying attention, and with the immigrants, you know, they clearly know how to use some of them. I'm not talking about all immigrants, not talking about all people, but there are people that come to America and they clearly know how to use our Constitution against us, and how to, you know, just sort of play a game to silence everyone. So if you question anything about Islam, you're an Islamophobe.
Right.
If you question anything about homosexuality, you're a homophobe. If you question anything about black behavior, then you are a racist. And so it's all about using language and manipulation to shut down people. And how does this apply to the Congo? I'll let you tell me.
You know, one of the things that I want to talk about in the Congo, and I brought it up last year. When I walked onto the stage, I had a knife and a spoon and a fork in my hand, and I held them up and I said, of course through a translator because I don't speak French, I said, which one's threatening? Which one's dangerous? And of course they all kind of look at me for a minute, and I hold up each one individually, and when I hold up the knife, they're like, that's the one that's dangerous. And I said, that's funny, and I threw it on the floor, and I looked for a couple of seconds, and I'm like, it's harmless. How about the fork? And I threw it on the floor, also harmless. And so now they're looking at their spoon and they're going, how is that dangerous? And I say, well, here's the thing you got to know about the spoon. It's like leadership. It's neutral. Because influence, that's leadership. Nothing more, nothing less. Just influence. But here's what you have to know. The president has influence, and so does a 14-year-old drug dealer. Mm-hmm. They both have influence. And they both use that influence to lead others to do, to lead others to behave, to lead others to have, to lead others to crave. And whether I use this spoon to feed you or I use this spoon to gouge your eye out, the spoon is still just a spoon. What you need to know is that influence is driven by the heart of the user. So if you're going to lead in government, it's not about your tools, it's not about your practices, it's not even about the form of government, it's about the heart of the user of that form of government.
Well, I mean, one of the things that we know, I mean, the two of us know, is that when you go back to Marxism, that Karl Marx hated Christianity and religion. And the Marxists, their goal has been to destroy Judeo-Christian values. And so a lot of what takes place is very demonic at its roots.
Yeah.
And people, when they get separated from, you know, any notion of a creator, any notion of accountability, a hereafter, there's nothing really to restrain them. And so when you have communism or socialism, you tend to have a society that devalues life at every stage, and they target our children. And they
want to lead them to believe the same corrupt ideas.
Yes.
Lead them away from God. Lead them to anything that would be sensual or physical or carnal, and not godly.
Yes, and you know, like some of the things I've done in recent years, my latest 2 books have been books that were geared towards educating the public, particularly the American public. The new book is Abduction: How Liberalism Steals the Hearts and Minds of Our Children. And
Wow.
It shows just how, whether your child is going to a public school or a private school, or they're just, you know, looking at cartoons, that everything is geared towards corrupting children, that in America that children are devalued at every stage of development, from conception all the way through. And you see it through how the society tries to sexualize our children for adults. I mean, because the adults are the ones that actually end up, you know, abusing the children, but they abuse themselves too when they get involved in early sex and inappropriate behavior. And then the other book is Be the People, A Call to Reclaim America's Faith and Promise. And that's about reconnecting people to what made America special. Like a lot of Americans, I don't think they read, or maybe they don't remember, the Declaration of Independence. Why men were willing, you know, to risk their lives, their fortunes, their reputations, you know, to found a nation. And then the Constitution, like when's the last time the average American read the Constitution? What do they believe about the Bill of Rights? And I would say the 10 Commandments, that those are documents that have influenced our society and other Western societies. And to be educated and to understand, you know, what it means to be an American, you have to read those documents. And I think that we have lost sight of ourselves as a nation, or why people would risk their lives, you know, to come here.
And it's funny too, because you hear people talk about the Book of the Martyrs, for an example. Fox's Book of the Martyrs, or the story of the Wycliffe translators who went into the African bush, or they went into the like the Congo River, and they found themselves face to face with people who'd never seen a white person and said, "We're going to kill you." Like cannibals that literally ate them alive. But they felt like their call to preach the gospel was so strong they would lay down their life to do that. And from everything that I've read and studied, the men who got on the boats, the women who got on the boats, the family who got on the boats to come to America had the same mindset. We're going to spread the gospel of Jesus Christ. We're going to create a new place. We're going for religious liberty and religious freedom to take the gospel of Jesus Christ to whoever's there.
Well, here's the situation today. In some of the third world nations, there are people that find Jesus Christ, and they're far more righteous than we are, because they're actually trying to live that biblical lifestyle. They read the Bible, and they don't try to make excuses for what it says.
Or compromise it with Western society, because it's hard to be a Christian and be wealthy.
And you know, like I was reading someone that it's going to be the people from the third world that will have to evangelize and save us and remind us of who we are. And so when you go to the Congo, you know, those that are strong believers there, God may bring some of them to nations like the United States.
I was just talking to a guy earlier today that said he's here from Africa to build a television broadcasting company to evangelize the United States from Africa.
Well, I believe that God would do that, because we in America have lost our way. And in the behaviors from the universities, it's so irrational. And you know, when it comes to
indoctrinating our kids, like you said, from kindergarten all the way through the university system.
And when it comes to transgenderism, all of a sudden, you know, like the people that were secular humanists, they used to mock Christians and say they were unscientific, you know, they were stupid. But the political left, they've pushed themselves into the absurd position where they have to argue against science, argue against the X and Y chromosome.
Now there's, what, 39 different sexualities that you could have?
And they also argue, I mean, they have to argue that men can give birth to children. I mean, like a man can birth a child. We know that that's not true, that men are not born.
You got to be able to manipulate something.
Not only are they're not born of wombs, science has not figured out a way to implant one in a man. And so...
Well, I don't know. I saw in the news the other day they had created a fake woman, had a sheep growing in it.
Well, I mean, there was some kind of bag. It was a sack hanging on the wall. And they can use 3 or 4 DNAs, and that reminds you of just some science fiction horror movie.
Franken-sheep.
I can say that America is in trouble. And for your viewers, I would recommend, you know, if you're interested in understanding what's taking place on the university campuses and in our society, read some of Herbert Marcuse's work, read Saul Alinsky, reread George Orwell's 1984, read some of the Communist Manifesto. If you read it, in graduate school, reread it. A lot of the things that are taking place are things that were carefully thought out. And there's a guy named Cleon Skousen. He wrote a book called The Naked Communist. It has an appendix. That appendix has 45 goals that were listed as current communist goals. The book was published in 1958. It was read, the appendix with the 45 communist goals were read into the congressional record in 1963. Most of those communist goals have been achieved, and some of them involve infiltrating the churches, discrediting the FBI, pushing homosexuality as normal, destroying the family. It's all listed there. Normalizing relations with communist nations, taking over the schools. It was all laid out. And you can go to the book that was published in 1958, look in the table of contents for the current communist goals. Those goals were read into the congressional record in 1963. Almost all of them have been attained. And so when you see what's taking place in American society, don't think that it was because we got wiser, that it was a natural progression. No, someone had a vision. They worked very hard. The rest of us were sleeping and enjoying our lives, and that's how it happened.
Very similar to how Hitler took over an entire nation and turned them against a population.
Yes.
So if you haven't read the book by Andy Andrews called How to Kill 11 Million People, you might add that to that reading list.
And also add my books.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I've tagged Dr. Carol on my Facebook page, so you can click on there and find her page, and you'll find all of the books that she has available. Connect with her as well. If you have got any kind of event going on where speaking about government and politics is important to your audience, Dr. Carol is obviously a wealth of knowledge and a wealth of resource. You need to have her as part of your agenda.
Thank you.
Dr. Carol, thank you for your time. I really appreciate it. And thank you all for watching today. I am J Loren Norris, and you've been watching Tell It Like It Is TV. Have a blessed day.
Thank you.